Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a close look at those fascinating little gatekeepers in our neurons and muscle cells, voltage-gated sodium channels.
They are pretty fascinating.
And we had a request to zoom in on these guys and understand exactly how they trigger those electrical signals we call action potentials.
Right.
Plus, we'll touch on their role in pain and even heart rhythm issues,
Right.
which I know can be pretty serious stuff.
Absolutely. It really is amazing how much action is packed into these tiny little structures.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics. How do these sodium channels actually trigger those electrical signals, those action potentials?
Well, imagine a neuron just sitting there at rest. It's kind of like a room with a slightly negative charge compared to the outside world. And that difference in charge, that's the membrane potential. And it's absolutely crucial for generating those electrical signals we're talking about.
So the membrane potential is like a battery storing potential energy.
Exactly. Now, when the neuron receives a signal, it's kind of like flipping a switch. This causes a change in the membrane potential, making it less negative. And that's where our voltage-gated sodium channels come in.
So the membrane potential is changing, becoming more positive.
Right.
But how does the sodium channel actually sense this change?
Yes.
You mentioned a specific domain, right?
Absolutely. Within each sodium channel, there's a voltage sensing domain. Think of it as a tiny little sensor that detects those changes in the electrical field across the cell membrane. When that membrane potential reaches a certain threshold, it's like a trigger for the channel.
So it's like the sensor flips a switch, opening the channel.
Precisely. The channel opens and suddenly sodium ions, which are positively charged, come rushing into the cell. It's like a flood of people all trying to get through a door that's suddenly opened.
That's a great image. So this influx of positive ions, what does it do to the neuron?
Well, it increases the positive charge inside the cell, and this causes a really rapid change in the membrane potential. We call that depolarization. And that depolarization, that's the key to generating that electrical signal, the action potential.
So the sodium ions rushing in, they're actually amplifying that signal.
Exactly, creating a cascade of positive charge.
Wow.
And this is where it gets even more fascinating. Once the channel opens and those sodium ions flood in, there's a second mechanism that comes into play. The channel doesn't just stay open forever. Shortly after opening, an inactivation gate swings shut, blocking the flow of those sodium ions.
It's like a timed door that automatically closes after a short period.
Exactly. This inactivation is crucial because it prevents that continuous influx of sodium ions, which could really disrupt that delicate balance within the cell. And it allows the membrane potential to reset, getting ready for the next signal to come along.
Wow, so it's like a perfectly choreographed dance. The voltage sensor triggers the opening. The sodium ions rush in. And then the inactivation gate slams shut. All happening in a fraction of a second.
It really is. And this intricate dance is happening constantly in our neurons, allowing us to think, move, and experience the world around us.
That's pretty amazing. And it makes you appreciate the complexity of the human body, even at the microscopic level.
It really does.
But you mentioned earlier that malfunctions in these channels can have some pretty serious consequences. Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. Imagine if those sodium channels didn't function the way they're supposed to. They could become overactive, sending out constant signals, or they could fail to open when they should, blocking signals altogether. Either way, it disrupts that delicate balance in our bodies, leading to a variety of problems.
So a faulty gate can either be stuck open, leading to a constant stream of signals, or it can fail to open, blocking signals entirely. What kind of problems can this cause?
Well, think about pain. Our nerves use sodium channels to transmit pain signals to the brain. If these channels are overactive, it can lead to chronic pain. On the other hand, if they fail to open properly, it could lead to a lack of sensation, which could be dangerous in certain situations.
So you might not feel an injury when you should.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. So malfunctioning sodium channels can really mess with our pain perception. What about heart rhythm problems? You mentioned those earlier as well.
In the heart, sodium channels play a crucial role in regulating the heartbeat. They help to generate the electrical signals that control the contraction of the heart muscle. If these channels malfunction, it can disrupt the heart's rhythm, leading to arrhythmias.
So in the heart, it's all about timing. If those channels aren't opening and closing in perfect sync, it can throw off the entire rhythm.
Exactly. And that's why Understanding how these channels work is so important for developing treatments for conditions like chronic pain and arrhythmias.
You also mentioned that drugs can target these channels.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well, some drugs work by actually physically blocking the sodium channel.
Okay.
It's like putting a cork in the doorway, preventing the flow of ions.
Okay.
This is how local anesthetics like lidocaine work. They temporarily block pain signals by preventing those sodium ions from passing through the channels.
So when the dentist says you'll feel a little pinch, they're actually blocking those sodium channels to prevent you from feeling pain. That's fascinating.
It is. Other drugs work by binding to very specific sites on the channel protein, modulating its behavior. This can make the channel more or less sensitive to voltage changes, or it can alter how quickly that inactivation gate closes.
So some drugs are like a physical barrier, while others are more like subtle influencers, tweaking the channel's performance.
That's a great way to put it. And by understanding these different mechanisms of action, scientists can develop drugs that target specific types of sodium channels, increasing their effectiveness while minimizing side effects.
This is all really incredible. It seems like we've covered a lot of ground already, but I'm sure there's even more to explore.
You're right, we haven't even touched on the specific steps involved in the sodium channel's action, or how these channels are involved in conditions like epilepsy.
Well, I guess that means we'll have to continue this deep dive in our next segment. Stay tuned.
There's definitely a lot more to these channels.
Right. We talked about that rush of sodium ions, the opening and closing of gates.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot is happening incredibly fast.
It really is a rapid process. So at rest, the channel is closed. That activation gate is shut tight, preventing any sodium ions from entering the neuron.
So it's like a locked door, keeping those sodium ions out.
A great analogy. Now remember that trigger we discussed. The change in membrane potential.
Yeah.
When the membrane potential reaches a certain threshold, that voltage sensing domain, it springs into action, detects that change, and causes this kind of shift in the protein structure of the channel.
So the voltage sensing domain is like the key that unlocks the door.
Exactly. This shift, this conformational change, causes the activation gate to swing open. Now the pathway is clear, and sodium ions driven by their electrochemical gradient rush into the cell.
It's not just the open door, it's like there's a pressure pushing those sodium ions in, too.
Right. That's the electrochemical gradient, creating a driving force. And this influx of positive charge further depolarizes the membrane, leading to the rising phase of the action potential, a self-reinforcing cycle for a brief moment.
So the initial rush of ions actually helps keep that gate open a little bit longer.
Precisely. But remember, we don't want this influx to continue indefinitely. That's where the inactivation gate comes in. A fraction of a millisecond after the activation gate opens, the inactivation gate swings shut, effectively plugging the channel.
Like a timed door slamming shut to control the flow.
Yes. Now the sodium influx is cut off, and the membrane potential can begin to return to its resting state. The channel is now in its inactive state, unable to open again right away, even if there's another change in membrane potential.
So there's like a brief refractory period where the channel needs to reset before it can be triggered again.
Exactly. This refractory period is crucial for making sure that action potentials only travel in one direction down the neuron.
Right.
It prevents the signal from bouncing back and forth.
Okay, so it's like a one-way street for those electrical signals.
Yeah.
But how does this signal actually travel down the neuron? We talked about conduction, right?
Yes. Conduction is the propagation of that electrical signal down the axon of the neuron.
Okay.
And it's all thanks to the placement of our voltage-gated sodium channels along the axon.
So it's not just one channel doing all the work.
No.
It's a team effort.
Absolutely. The depolarization caused by the influx of sodium ions through one channel actually triggers the opening of neighboring channels a little further down the axon. It's like this chain reaction with each channel amplifying the signal and passing it along.
Each channel is like a relay station boosting the signal and sending it to the next one.
Exactly. This rapid sequential opening of sodium channels is what allows for the rapid propagation of the action potential down the neuron, enabling those split-second responses we rely on.
It's amazing how this whole intricate process happening at the microscopic level underlies so many of our bodily functions.
Right.
And we've seen how malfunctions in these channels can lead to problems like chronic pain and heart rhythm issues.
Yeah.
But we also touched on how drugs can target these channels. Can we dig a little deeper into that?
Of course. As we discussed, some drugs like local anesthetics work by directly blocking the sodium channel pore.
Yeah.
This prevents sodium ions from passing through, effectively blocking the transmission of pain signals.
So it's like putting a temporary roadblock on the neuron highway, preventing the pain signal from reaching its destination.
A great analogy. But there are other ways to manipulate these channels. Some drugs bind to specific sites on the channel protein, modulating its behavior without completely blocking it.
So instead of a roadblock, it's more like adjusting the speed limit or adding a detour.
Precisely. For example, some drugs can make the channel less sensitive to voltage changes, meaning a stronger signal is needed to trigger its opening.
Okay.
This can be helpful in conditions like epilepsy, where uncontrolled neuronal firing is a problem.
That makes sense. It's
Right.
like turning down the volume on those overactive neurons. Are there other ways drugs can influence these channels?
Yes. Some drugs can actually alter the speed of inactivation,
Okay.
making the channel close more quickly or more slowly. This can be useful in regulating heart rhythm.
So it's all about fine-tuning the channel's performance to address specific problems. It seems like there's a whole world of possibilities for drug development in this area.
Absolutely. And the more we understand about how these channels work, the better equipped we are to develop targeted therapies for a wide range of conditions.
This has been a fascinating journey into the world of voltage-gated sodium channels. We've covered a lot of ground, from the specific steps involved in their action to their role in pain, heart rhythm, and drug targeting.
Yeah. We've really delved into those molecular intricacies of how they sense voltage changes,
Right.
open and close their gates, and propagate those essential electrical signals.
It's incredible how much is happening at the microscopic level to keep our bodies functioning properly. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more aspect we need to explore.
Oh, you're referring to the prompt's question about why these channels are so crucial in pain and arrhythmias.
Exactly. We've talked about how they work.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand why their role is so significant in these specific conditions.
You're absolutely right. Let's take a closer look at those connections in our final segment.
All right, so let's zero in on those two key areas: pain and heart rhythm. Why are voltage-gated sodium channels so important in these functions?
Okay, well, when we talk about pain, it all starts with those sensory neurons all over our body.
Yeah.
You know, they're responsible for detecting all sorts of stimuli, heat, pressure, tissue damage, you name it.
So if I, stub my toe,
Yeah.
those sensory neurons are the ones sending that ouch signal to my brain
Exactly. And how do those signals get from your toe to your brain?
through action potentials, those super fast electrical signals,
Right, those impulses we've been talking about.
zipping down the neuron's axon
Yeah.
thanks to those sodium channels.
Precisely. Now imagine if those sodium channels, those ones in your pain-sensing neurons,
Okay.
what if they malfunction?
Yeah.
Let's say they become overactive.
Okay.
Suddenly, they could be firing off action potentials even when there's no real pain stimulus.
Oh, so it's like a faulty alarm system
Yeah,
going off when there's no real danger.
perfect analogy. And that constant barrage of pain signals, even without a real cause, well, that could lead to chronic pain.
That makes sense. So overactive sodium channels in pain neurons could be a big contributor to those persistent pain issues some people experience.
It's a possibility.
What about the opposite? What if the channels are underactive?
Well, then those pain signals, they might not be transmitted effectively, even when there is a real injury.
So you might not feel a cut or a burn,
Yeah,
which could be really dangerous.
exactly. It's all about that balance. Those sodium channels have to be functioning just right to make sure you feel pain when you should.
It's amazing how much these tiny little channels affect us.
It is.
All right, let's shift gears to the heart.
Okay.
How do these sodium channels contribute to keeping our heart beating in rhythm?
Well, picture the heart as this amazingly complex electrical circuit.
Okay.
Every single heartbeat is initiated by this wave of electrical excitation. It spreads through the heart muscle, causing it to contract in a coordinated way.
So it's like a perfectly timed electrical impulse that keeps everything pumping.
Yes. And guess who plays a major role in generating and spreading that impulse?
I'm going to guess
Yeah.
are voltage-gated sodium channels.
Bingo! They're the key to ensuring that electrical signal spreads quickly and smoothly through the heart muscle.
Okay, so we need those channels to keep the heart's electrical system in tip-top shape. But what happens when they malfunction?
Well, if they're not working properly, it can throw off the entire rhythm of the heartbeat. You know, they might open too easily, causing the heart to beat too fast. Or they might not open quickly enough, leading to a slower heart rate.
So it's like a conductor leading an orchestra.
Yeah.
But the conductor is messing up and the music is all over the place.
It is. Yeah. And those disruptions in heart rhythm, those arrhythmias, well, they can be very serious.
That makes sense.
Even life-threatening in some cases.
It's incredible to think that these tiny channels,
I know,
these microscopic gatekeepers, have such a massive impact on our overall health.
It really shows you how important it is to understand how they work.
This deep dive has been truly amazing. We've learned how voltage-gated sodium channels affect everything from how we perceive pain to the rhythm of our hearts. We explored how they actually work. And we've talked about how malfunctions in these channels can lead to a bunch of health issues. And of course, we discussed how drugs can be designed to target these channels and offer some hope for treatment. It really makes you appreciate just how complex life is.
It does.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of voltage-gated sodium channels. We'll see you on the next deep dive.